The old building at the edge of town had a reputation no one dared test. People whispered about it, warning that the last room on the top floor was forbidden for a reason. No one knew why, and no one who entered the building alone ever came out quite the same. Tonight, I decided to find out, even though every instinct screamed, turn around. As I pushed open the creaking door, the air inside felt colder than outside, heavy and still. Dust floated in the narrow shafts of moonlight, twisting lazily as if to warn me. The floors groaned under my weight, echoing through the emptiness, and every step made my heart pound louder. Somewhere deep inside, I could feel the building watching, waiting, and judging every move I made. Before I moved further, take a second to like and subscribe, because stories like this on Unblinking are not just told, they follow you home. The stairwell stretched endlessly upward, each step tighter and narrower than the last. Shadows clung to the corners, forming shapes my mind refused to name. A faint smell of something old and metallic lingered, making my stomach twist in anticipation. I reached the top floor, where the hallway narrowed into a single corridor of closed doors. Every other door was cracked, some slightly open, but the last one was sealed, marked with a faded sign. No one is allowed. My hand shook as I touched the doorknob, cold and smooth under my fingers. Something whispered, almost inside my mind, "Turn back. It's too late if you enter." Curiosity 1. I opened the door slowly, the hinges whining in protest. The room was dark, the kind of darkness that seemed to breathe and move with a life of its own. A low, steady pulse echoed from the far corner, like something alive was waiting. I stepped in, the door clicking shut behind me, and I realized the air was impossibly thick, as if the room had swallowed the hallway whole. Shadows shifted along the walls, forming shapes I couldn't recognize, and every instinct screamed that I was not alone. The pulse grew louder, and I understood that it wasn't a heartbeat, it was measuring mine. Fear filled every inch of me, and yet I couldn't move. The building, the room, something unseen, it was aware I was there. I tried to leave, but the door wouldn't budge. It was as if it had fused with the frame. Whispers filled the room, soft, calm, almost intimate, calling my name in voices I didn't recognize. And then I saw it, a figure at the far corner, barely moving, draped in shadows, watching, patient, and waiting for me to look directly. Every second stretched endlessly, and the walls seemed to close in. The room remembered everything I had done, every fear I'd ever felt, cataloged it, and now it used it against me. A chill wrapped around my chest, pressing down, heavy, deliberate. I realized then that the last room didn't just forbid entry, it trapped those who ignored the warnings. The shadows shifted again, forming something almost human, yet wrong. It didn't speak, it didn't move fast, it just observed, studying my fear like a mirror reflecting my worst memories. Panic surged, but I stayed silent, hoping that the room's patience might allow me to leave. Hours or maybe minutes, I couldn't tell past. The figure didn't approach. It didn't vanish. It waited, and I understood then that fear wasn't an enemy here. It was the key. The more I felt it, the longer I stayed, and the deeper the room remembered me. The longer I stayed in the room, the heavier the air became, pressing against my lungs and chest like invisible hands. Shadows stretched along the walls, flickering and twitching as if they were alive, responding to my every movement. I tried to calm myself, telling my mind that it was only imagination, that it was just the old building and its creaks. But deep down I knew that something in the room was aware, patient, and far older than I could understand. Then the whispers started. Soft at first, barely audible, but slowly growing in intensity. They spoke my name, each syllable deliberate, teasing, as if testing my resolve. I wanted to leave, but my body felt rooted to the floor, as if the room had latched onto my fear. Every corner seemed to shift subtly, making the walls appear closer than before, twisting the space into shapes I couldn't comprehend. A sudden chill ran down my spine, and I realized the shadows were moving toward me, not quickly, but deliberately. Like a tide, the figure I had glimpsed before now stood closer, its form still indistinct, but undeniably there. I wanted to scream, to run, to escape, but my voice caught in my throat. And then, almost silently, the door creaked behind me, as if warning me not to look. I forced myself to step forward, inch by inch, heart hammering in my chest. Each footstep felt like it echoed endlessly, bouncing off the walls in ways that made me dizzy. The whispers changed, now speaking words I couldn't understand. Though their meaning was clear, I had trespassed, and now the room was claiming me. Fear no longer felt like a warning, it had become a tether, binding me to the space. The figure moved slightly, and suddenly I realized it wasn't alone. Shapes flickered at the edges of my vision, twisted and impossible, observing me in silence. I tried to shut my eyes, to ignore them, but I could still feel their attention, cold and deliberate. My mind raced, trying to find logic, a reason, a way out, but the room had none to offer. Then I noticed the walls, the paint peeling in shapes that weren't there before. Shadows forming patterns that looked like hands, reaching. The temperature dropped, and my breath came out in frosty clouds, even though I hadn't felt cold moments before. The figure stepped forward, its face still hidden, but the presence so heavy I could feel it pressing against my chest. I knew in that moment that the room didn't want me to leave. It wanted me to see, to remember, to fear. Panic finally took hold, and I ran, turning back to the door. It wouldn't budge. My hands trembled as I pushed and shoved, the door now heavier than steel. The whispers escalated into a low, humming chorus, all voices speaking at once, calling my name, teasing my thoughts, clawing at my mind. And then I felt it, a cold, deliberate touch brushed against my shoulder. Not harsh, not fast, but patient, enough to make me freeze completely. I pressed my back against the far wall, realizing I was trapped. Every instinct screamed to fight, to run, to do something anything but. The room had anticipated it all. Fear became a living thing around me, wrapping me in a web I couldn't see, didn't understand, and couldn't escape. I remembered then why no one was allowed in the last room. It didn't need to act to control you. It only needed you to notice it. Hours may have passed, or only Menisai couldn't tell. Time didn't exist here in the usual sense. I whispered a plea, hoping that acknowledgement, a recognition of the room's power, might allow me to survive. And in the echo of my own voice, I felt the figure withdraw slightly, as if testing me. Patient, waiting to see if I would break completely or endure. I don't know how long I stood there, paralyzed, my eyes fixed on the corner where the shadows had thickened. The air pulsed around me, alive, as if the room itself had a heartbeat. Every whisper, every subtle shift in darkness made my skin crawl. And I realized this wasn't a room, it was a presence. It remembered me, and every fear I'd ever felt was cataloged, waiting to be tested. A sudden movement caught my eye. The figure stepped closer, its face still hidden, but the shadows around it curling in ways that defied logic. My legs screamed to run, but my body refused to respond. I could feel it measuring me, weighing my courage against my panic, and it seemed to enjoy the tension it had created. I tried speaking, hoping that words could somehow reach whatever it was. I don't belong here, I stammered, voice shaking. The whispers didn't answer, but the room responded anyway. The temperature dropped further, and I could see my breath forming thin clouds in the heavy air, twisting toward the figure as if carrying my fear directly to it. Something shifted near the walls. Shadows stretched and bent unnaturally, forming shapes that looked almost human. They weren't moving quickly, but they were definitely there, watching. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might burst, and I realized that every story I'd ever ignored about this building, every warning whispered in the town, was suddenly terrifyingly real. The figure stepped forward, gliding without sound, closer, patient. And then I noticed the corner of the room there was a faint glow, almost imperceptible, coming from what looked like a small alcove. The walls themselves seemed to lean toward it, drawing my attention unwillingly. My mind screamed to look away, but curiosity, that dangerous curiosity, held me frozen. I moved closer, and the air thickened, pressing harder against my chest. The glow grew brighter, and the whispers converged into a single, chilling message. You are not supposed to see this. My body wanted to collapse, to sink into the floor and disappear, but my mind had already registered the truth. The last room wasn't just forbidden, it was alive, and it had been waiting for someone like me. Then the shadow surged forward slightly, not violently, but deliberately, as if testing my resolve. I felt a pressure on my shoulder, calm yet terrifying, and I realized I had to make a choice. To stay meant being consumed by fear, trapped in a memory the room would hold forever. To leave meant risking what I didn't understand, but at least I would survive. I took a shaky step back toward the door. It resisted at first, but the act of moving gave me momentum. With every step, the whispers became softer, almost reluctant, as if the room was giving me a chance. The figure didn't follow immediately. It waited, patient, knowing it had already marked me. Finally, I reached the door and pushed. It swung open slowly, groaning, and the weight lifted from my chest. I stumbled into the hallway, gasping, the normal air of the building almost unbearable in its mundanity. But I knew, as I ran down the stairwell and out into the night, that the last room would remember me forever. Every fear I felt, every step I took it had been recorded, cataloged, and would wait patiently for the next person who ignored the warnings. I knew I couldn't go back inside, yet something pulled me toward the top floor again, as if the building itself demanded I finish what I had started. The hallway stretched unnaturally, shadows bending around corners, almost alive. Every step I took echoed louder than possible, reverberating through the walls. I felt the air thicken with a presence, patient and knowing, like the last room itself was breathing around me. The door stood there, unchanged, marqued boldly, "No one is allowed." My hand trembled as I reached for the knob, half afraid to touch it, half compelled. The moment my fingers grazed the cold metal, a whisper filled my mind. "You returned." I froze, realizing the room wasn't just a place, it was aware of my every thought, my every fear. And now it was deciding how much I was allowed to see. I pushed open the door, and the darkness inside seemed to swallow the hallway whole. The shadows moved faster now, forming shapes that were human but wrong, faces contorted in impossible ways. The figure I had glimpsed before was at the far corner, its hollow eyes bleeding slowly, patient, deliberate, and the whispers turned into a chorus, a low, steady hum that wrapped around my mind, making me doubt what was real. I tried to back away, but the floor felt sticky, as if the room itself was holding me. Fear became tangible, pressing against my chest, making every breath a struggle. The figure stepped closer, and I saw the truth. The room fed on attention, on acknowledgement, on curiosity. Every visitor who entered and survived carried its memory forever, just as I now did. Then suddenly, the air shifted. The door behind me creaked open slightly, inviting escape. I ran without thinking, slipping past the shadows and down the stairwell, my heart pounding like a drum in my ears. The whispers followed, fighting, slowly patient, but never gone. I emerged into the cool night air, gasping, knowing the last room had won in its own way. It had remembered me, and I could never forget it. Even now, I walk past old buildings with caution, heart racing when I sense a room watching me. Some warnings are meant to be obeyed. Curiosity can be deadly, and if you ever find yourself near a building with a locked door and a warning not to enter, don't. The last room is patient. It waits, and it remembers. If you enjoyed this chilling story, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Unblinking. More stories are waiting. Some of them may follow you home. And remember, the next time curiosity whispers your name, think twice before answering.